Welcome in. It's great to have you with us today for another deep dive.
Yeah, really glad you could join us.
So as a learner, you're probably pretty used to digging into, archives and history books to understand the story of a specific place.
Right, that's the usual route.
But today, we're doing something a bit different. I mean, imagine building a grand church entirely backwards just because the rock beneath your feet is too stubborn to break.
Which is wild to even picture.
Or carving this masterpiece out of fragile, shattering lead to ward off the Black Death. Or, and this is my favorite, taking a zip line over 400-million-year-old marine fossils just to get to a rock concert.
It sounds like a completely chaotic mix of timelines.
Yeah.
But it's actually the very real story of a single place.
Exactly. So for this deep dive, we're exploring a massive stack of sources. We've got tour guides, museum archives, geopark literature, theater histories, and they're all centered on Kielce.
Right, in the Świętokrzyskie region of Poland.
Yeah. It's this highly surprising, deeply multi-layered city. And the mission today is to show you how a city literally builds its culture from the bedrock up. Whether you're a history buff or like a geology nerd or an art lover, this place is incredible.
It really is. Because if you want to understand human history, you usually look at what we build above the surface.
Right.
But to understand Kielce, you have to look down. The physical landscape here wasn't just a foundation to build on. The geological makeup of this region completely dictated its human history.
It was the main character.
Exactly. It was the primary actor in the city's survival, its economy, and even its art.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can even talk about the people who walk these streets, we have to talk about the earth they stood on.
We do.
And that takes us to the Kadzielnia Nature Reserve, which is right in the southern part of Kielce. Now, looking at my notes, for almost 200 years, from 1770 up until 1962, this was a massive working limestone quarry.
It was. I mean, generations of workers were physically carving the Kadzielnia mountain away to burn the rock in lime kilns.
Just brutal, back-breaking labor.
Oh, absolutely. But what they were actually doing, without realizing it, was peeling back the geological history of the planet. Because this mountain is part of a larger range composed mostly of Upper Devonian limestone.
Okay, I've heard the term Devonian before, but for those of us who aren't geology nerds, what exactly are we looking at when we say Devonian limestone?
Well, we're looking at the fossilized remains of a marine environment from roughly 400 million years ago.
Wow, 400 million.
Yeah, it's often called the Age of Fishes. The Devonian period was this time when this part of the world was completely covered by warm, shallow seas.
So it was an ocean.
Exactly. So that limestone they were violently breaking apart with, pickaxes and explosives. It was essentially millions of years of crushed ancient corals, sponges, and marine life, all compressed into solid rock.
That is wild. I mean, they were literally destroying this ancient ocean floor to make industrial materials.
They were. But then they stopped mining in the 1960s.
Right. And the sources point out that right in the middle of this former industrial site sits something called the Skaska Geologo, or the Geologist's Rock. What's the significance of that specific spot?
So it's a 0.6 hectare protected natural reserve. And it was just left behind after the surrounding rock was quarried away.
Just standing there in the middle.
Yeah, it juts out like a monument right in the center of the excavation. And it is packed with the incredibly well-preserved fossilized remains of those ancient marine animals.
Oh, wow.
And here's the beautiful irony of it. Human industry, this relentless, destructive force of mining, actually exposed this ancient geological record.
That's true.
If they hadn't mined the mountain, we wouldn't have this profound visible window into the deep past.
I'm trying to picture what this space looks like today, because the tour guides in our stack emphasize that this isn't just some, roped off academic site. They built a massive venue in the southern part of this crater called the Kadzielnia Amphitheater.
They did. It was originally constructed in 1971, and it's been completely modernized since. It holds over 5,000 people.
5,000 people inside a quarry.
Yes, because by hollowing out the earth for limestone, the miners accidentally created the perfect physical and acoustic bowl.
Oh, of course. The sound bounces off the rock.
Exactly. The sheer rock walls reflect and amplify the acoustics beautifully.
So you're sitting in a modern concert venue, listening to live music, and you're just completely surrounded by towering prehistoric ocean walls.
It's an amazing atmosphere.
And there's an underground element here, too.
Yeah, there are 25 known caves in the immediate area, which were uncovered by the mining.
25? That's a lot of caves.
It is. And today there's a 145-meter underground tourist route that physically connects three of them: the Odkrikau, Prochauni, and Kadzielnia caves.
So you can literally go caving in the middle of the city.
You can explore this subterranean world forged millions of years ago, emerge back into the sunlight, and then literally take a modern zip line right over the quarry crater.
I love that so much. It's like slicing open a layered cake of time, you know? You have 400-million-year-old marine fossils right next to a modern zip line and a massive concert venue.
It completely redefines how we interact with the post-industrial landscape.
Yeah, it's not just a scarred piece of earth anymore. They turned it into a civic playground.
Right.
But looking at the history here, the relationship between the people of Kielce and the rock beneath their feet wasn't always just about, like, finding cool fossils and building amphitheaters. They were extracting some serious metals out of this region, too.
Absolutely. The earth didn't just give them a place to build, it gave them the ore that drove their early economy.
Right. The sources mention iron.
Yeah, for centuries, they melted iron in these ancient disposable clay structures called demarca, or smoke furnaces.
Disposable furnaces?
Yeah, they would build a clay chimney, fill it with iron ore and charcoal, burn it at incredibly high temperatures, and then literally have to smash the furnace to pieces just to get the iron bloom out.
Talk about labor-intensive, building a whole oven just to smash it.
It was incredibly tough work. But it wasn't just iron. The archives talk extensively about a mineral called galenite.
Right, galenite. What exactly is that?
Galenite is lead sulfide, and it was incredibly valuable. But extracting it wasn't as simple as just digging a hole in the ground.
Because of the limestone?
Partially. But you have to understand how the ore got there in the first place. Deep within the earth, over immense stretches of time, hot, mineral-rich solutions of lead moved up toward the surface.
Like underwater thermal vents or something?
Sort of, but underground. And as they rose, they pooled and crystallized inside seismic faults.
Okay, so the natural cracks in the rock.
Exactly. These natural cracks within the hard limestone.
Yeah.
So the lead wasn't just sitting in big, easy-to-reach underground lakes. It was threaded through the bedrock like veins.
Which means you can't just dig straight down.
Precisely. And that meant the miners had to utilize a grueling technique known as following the ore. They couldn't just blast wide tunnels. They had to meticulously chisel their way through the brutal limestone, carving out narrow, jagged niches by tracking these specific seismic fault lines to extract the galenite.
Wow.
Their physical labor was dictated entirely by the ancient tectonic movements of the earth.
Okay, so you have generations of people engaged in this incredibly harsh, dangerous underground work. It makes total sense that they would have a profound, almost spiritual connection to the rock itself.
He really did.
But in the 17th century, that connection takes a really dramatic turn. My notes highlight the Kartsoka Monastery, built in 1624. And this wasn't just a standard parish church, right? It was built as a votum and offering.
Right. At the time, a terrifying plague was ravaging the Lesser Poland region. Thousands of people were dying, and there was a profound sense of helplessness.
Because they had no idea what was causing it.
Exactly. But Kielce was miraculously spared. So the Bishop of Kraków, a man named Marcin Jaskowski, decided to build this monastery high up on a limestone hill as a monumental gesture of thanks.
And he dedicated it to St. Charles Borromeo. Who was he?
Borromeo was an archbishop of Milan. During a horrific epidemic in Italy a few decades earlier, most of the nobility and church hierarchy fled the city to save themselves.
Naturally.
But Borromeo heroically stayed behind. He risked his own life to care for the sick, organize hospitals, and guide the poorest citizens through the darkest hours of the outbreak.